told you. Got a few announcements before we get started with our exciting musical act today. You might have heard something about this being the bicentennial of the Erie Canal. Anyone hear about that? Good, I'm glad. If you didn't, see me and I'll give you some scoop on that. Sunday, September 28th is a huge day in Fairport because the Seneca Chief replica packet boat will be arriving in Fairport, coming from Pittsford, leaving Pittsford 2 o'clock, supposed to arrive in Fairport sometime 3:30 to 4-ish. So, Fairport Partnership, Fairport Perinton Merchants Association, Town of Perinton, Village of Fairport, they're all working together to come up with a bunch of really fun events based around this special arrival of the packet boat. So, Perinton Park, Sunday, September 28th. There will be fun and games to be had by all there from, I think they said 1 to 4. Perinton Historical Society will be at the Perinton Park Pavilion. We'll have a table and some Erie Canal items for people to see. And they're hoping that people that are in the park celebrating as the boats head through will go over to the side of the water and wave at everyone, because this is a big deal. The Colonial Belle, our own Fairport tour boat, will be heading toward Pittsford. We'll turn around in the wide waters there. We'll be leading the flotilla that includes the Seneca Chief, their tugboat. They've got a push boat coming with that. The Rivery from Rochester, the Sam Patch from Pittsford, the very newest boat in the fleet, the Tom Grasso, who, if you knew Tom, his life was Erie Canal, so wonderful tribute. And let's see, Colonial Belle, there are at least 10 boats that will be coming through, plus there will be pleasure boats that they're inviting to this. So a flotilla, and we mean flotilla. There are going to be a bunch of boats coming through. You want to be there. It's historic. It's exciting. So hopefully you can join us, and if you come to the park, come visit our table in the pavilion. We're going to have, as I said, some Erie Canal really exciting things on view there. So, and the other exciting thing is Seneca Chief is docking for 2 nights in Fairport. They will be giving tours, so they'll be here Sunday, September 28th, Monday, September 29th, and both those days you will be able to tour the boat. So if you get a chance, please join us for those celebrations. Our next program in this room is Tuesday, October 21st. Tracy Murphy, who is the director of the 5 historic Palmyra museums, will be giving a talk about the Fox Sisters and the rise of spiritualism. So that promises to be an interesting event. Now, we've had questions about house tour. Yes, this is usually house tour time. We have an amazing committee that puts the house tours together every year. They've tried their hardest. They could not get enough houses for a tour this year. So sadly, there will not be a tour. However, we're doing something different instead. We have a special Christmas carol that will be performed at the DeLand House on Main. We know it as the Green Lantern, Henry DeLand's house. And tickets for that will go on sale October 11th, but this will occur on December 13th in the afternoon. And you'll have Mr. Kim Tenrero, who will be performing a bunch of different roles from that show. So that promises to be a very special event. We do have limited tickets. We are opening that up to Perinton Historical Society members first. And that brings me to a great segue because it is membership renewal season. So, thank you for those of you who have already seen me and have given me your renewals. If you haven't renewed yet, it's not too late. Jim is here. Jim is our membership chair. And see us after the program so you can renew and make sure that you are taking advantage of everything Perinton Historical Society has to offer. Last thing, This time of the year, we're also talking about Yuletide traditions. Well, the committee got together and we wanted to find a way to freshen it up a little because we did it for 10 consecutive years. And it's a wonderful event that raises a lot of money for Perinton Historical Society, but it takes a lot of effort. What the committee decided to do this year is change the event to more of a fall program. So Saturday, November 22nd, the new event is called Savor the Season. We are still looking for donations of gift baskets, of services like, Suzanne, where are you? What would a service be that would be a good one?
I don't know, massage or...
Yeah. So if you are interested in donating some kind of gift cards, anything having to do with food is always a big plus. What we'll do this year is it will be a one-day event, November 22nd. We will have a party, and you can buy raffle tickets that will be put into the baskets that go with the gift basket you're interested in winning. So we are looking for donations for that, and also we're going to try baked goods as well. So if you are a baker, give us some baked goods. We like that. And those will be part of the raffle as well. So I think that's all we've got going on right now. Yes?
Could you give us an update on Bill Paray, how he's doing?
Bill Paray, thank you. If you haven't heard, Bill Paray was in a very serious motorcycle accident a few weeks ago. Not of his own doing. He was fortunate to have no broken bones, but he is still in recovery. But he was standing right here where I am on Saturday because we had a Fairport High School class of 75 reunion. And he gave a talk. I said, hey, do you want a chair? And he said, no, I'm good. You know, typical Bill. And typical Bill, he wandered all over the front of the room, even though he's still recovering. So thank you for that. He is doing okay. Thank you. All right.
When did the accident happen?
I'm trying to remember. It was a Friday afternoon a few weeks ago. That's all I remember. Yeah. Any other questions before we get started? This is good. This is fun. All right. So I am very pleased to welcome our guest back to the museum. He was our season opener last September with Songs and Stories of the American Civil War. This year, it's Songs and Stories of the Erie Canal. I had the pleasure of attending a performance last week that he did at my other job. And you are in for a treat because he is always very engaging and you're really going to love the songs that he sings. So please welcome Don Dwyer.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Don Dwyer. I'm going to do the songs and stories of the Erie Canal, which I have become now addicted to. I love it. It's one of the most important things that happened, well, probably the most important thing that happened in the 19th century in the United States. All the expansion, all the things that happened in the United States would not have happened or would have happened much later and much more difficult without the Erie Canal being built. As Vicky said, I was here last year. Was anybody here? Anybody here meet last year? And you came back? I don't get that. Nobody threw anything. I feel very good about that. So, anyway, let's just start right off. I'm going to go out of chronological order by doing possibly the only Civil War. Boy, I can't get that out of my head. By doing the only Erie Canal song that everybody knows, especially those of us of a certain age. Though I will tell you, my grandson, 10 years old, in his spring concert, they sang "Low Bridge, Everybody Down." And he didn't know any of the words. So he said, "Papa, I'm doing your song. We're doing your song." And so I'm looking forward to it. He also plays the drums. It's apparently the only thing he cares about. And I'm doing your song, so I watch him up there. His lips aren't even moving. Now, this song, Low Bridge Everybody Down, or the Erie Canal song, or some other names, it sounds so authentic. Those of you who may know, it sounds so authentic. Sounds like the time, sounds like 1840, 1850 on the old canal with the mules pulling the loads. Very pastoral, very calm, and written probably by a guy who was working on the canal, or maybe lived in one of the canal towns. Well, that's not true. That's not true. It was written by a guy named Thomas Allen. He was born in 1876 in Boston, Massachusetts, and he didn't even get here until 1910. And things were very different by 1910. He was a musical man. That's why, and to do a little segue, it's a great song. It really is all on its own. Believe me, you all owe me big money for all of the Erie Canal songs I am not going to subject you to. They're really, truly awful. There's a lot of them. The good ones are written more, in the late 1800s. And this, of course, is 1910. It's a great song. There's technical things he did. He's got key changes, and anyway, he does a wonderful song. Well, he is a songwriter. I don't know if he was a singer or a performer, but he was a songwriter, played instruments, but he was a band leader, and he would run orchestras and this and that, which is why he was in Rochester in 1910. He was the business end of music. He was managing two bands when he was in Rochester. And he had numerous people come up to him and say, Thomas, how much they missed the old Erie Canal, because until the canal was widened and deepened, it was also a lot of it, some of it was redirected. Used to come right through the city of Rochester, as I'm sure you know, right over the viaduct, or the aqueduct that went over the Genesee River, and that was the Erie Canal. And they loved that feeling of the mules and how quiet it was. I don't know if they loved the stuff that the mules left behind. They said they did, apparently. But in one of the improvements, they redirected it. No longer came through the city, and they really missed it. That's the reason why this guy wrote the song. Wrote it in 1910. He used to write songs that were published in Tin Pan Alley, so he could not have been further away than an 1840s guy who lived in one of the canals. Please feel free to sing along. God knows I need the help. Well, I've got a mule, her name is Sam, 15 miles on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker, a good old pal. 15 miles on the Erie Canal. We all saw margins in our day, filled with timber, coal and hay. I'm on every step of the way, from Albany to Buffalo. very long time, until really not all that long before they started building it, was not considered a real thing, something that was possible. But it took visionaries to see that this was so necessary. The United States was, as soon as the war ended, it was 13 states, as you know, strung out along the Atlantic Ocean. But the problem was they're separated by the Appalachian Mountains from the West. And the West could be Ohio, in the way they thought back then. There were some Americans living there. Getting over those mountains, getting through those mountains was so difficult. It was dangerous, it took forever, and there were Americans on the other side. Now, when the Revolutionary War ended, it took, again, it took a visionary, and one of the visionaries was George Washington, which pleased me because he's my hero. I love George Washington. I don't know if he likes me, but I really like him. And he saw the problem that we were going to have. We were separated from these other Americans. No country can survive unless it can have commerce, at least with itself, right? So those people that were over there that were Americans, eventually were going to trade with somebody. They couldn't trade with the people on the coast, so they're going to trade with people that are using the Mississippi River for navigation and for trade. And that would be the Canadians in the North/British, who we had just fought, or the Spanish and the French in the South. That's just that they would eventually, Washington's fear was they eventually would no longer be Americans. So how can you expand through a group of people who aren't even American again? So this great land that we have from sea to shining sea, it was really going to be tough to expand, and he saw that. There had to be commerce. So he was looking around, and there was a company that was basically bankrupt called the Potomac Company. And what they did is they used the Potomac River. The idea was, they hadn't completed it, they wanted to use the Potomac River to get up and over the Appalachians, and that's how they would have commerce, and that's how people would get back and forth. Now, Washington saw that, and he took over the company. They had no money, they had no leadership. Now, you get George Washington, you've got leadership. But he took care of the money problem because this is George Washington. The war is just over, and they needed investors. Can you imagine any American with money who was approached by the father of our country and turning him down? Probably not. So money no longer became the big problem. Now the problem became, how do you do it? And the goal was to build a series of 5 canals to go up the river, and then build a series of 5 canals to get around the natural problems, falls, rapids, that sort of thing. That was the goal. But you had problems with natural bodies of water. That being, it floods in the spring. The Potomac River would flood in the spring, and it would be dry in the summer. So you had a very low navigation season. And it was just difficult to get around these things, but still, they had pretty good engineers, and they were doing a pretty nice job. And then unfortunately for the Potomac Company, but fortunately for the United States, George Washington became president. So he left the company, and he did amazing things as president, but that didn't help. They were financed fairly well at this point, but they were running into things they just couldn't get through. There was an elevation system, the Fisherstown or something. It took them 7 years to solve it. By that time, all the money was gone, and they eventually went under. Now, I'm going to sing a song that I found called "The Erie Was Rising." Great tune, just a great tune, and I really am expecting some help. My voice is going. I need help from the audience. That's your job. See, the refrain, I thought of you people from up here in Fairport specifically, because the refrain is, oh, the Erie was rising and the gin was getting low. You can see why I thought of that. So there's only 2 lines, so I'll teach them to you real quick. And if you could just repeat it after me. Oh, the Erie was rising, and the gin was getting low in Fairport. And I scarcely think I'll get another drink till I get to Buffalo. So it's the Erie was rising, and the gin was getting low. I scarcely think I'll get a drink till I get to Buffalo. Very good. I mean, I see some of your faces have just turned white. Now we were 40 miles from Albany to get an every shot. What a terrible storm we had that night. Sorry. He was rising, the gin was getting low, and scarcely had another drink to get to Buffalo. And we were loaded down with barley, we were chopped up filled with rye, and the captain, he looked down at me with a horrible, vicious eye. And he was rising, the gin was getting low. I scarcely think I'll get another drink till I get to Buffalo. Oh, I get to Buffalo. Now the cook, she was a grand old gal. She wore a ragged dress. We hoist her up the mast as a signal of distress. And we was rising, the gin was getting low. I scarcely think I'll get another drink till we get to Buffalo. Now maybe on the horse bridge, my head up by the back. It better be a Lockport, London, or a town or London town. Ah, the Erie was rising, the gin was getting low. I scarcely think I'll get another drink till I get to Buffalo. Oh, get to Buffalo. Oh, we were 3 miles out from Syracuse. Our vessel struck ashore. We'd all have liked to flounder and it chugged like a woman in coal. Oh, here I was rising, the gin was getting low. I scarcely think I'll get another drink till I get to Buffalo. Oh, get to Buffalo. Now I hollered to the driver on the towpath trader. He jumped aboard and fixed the leak with his open flannel shirt. And the Erie was rising, the gin was getting low. Scarcely think I'll get another drink till I get to Buffalo. Oh, I get to Buffalo. Now our captain, he got married. Our cook, she went to jail. And I'm the only son of the sea that I left to tell the tale. Oh, the Erie was rising, the gin was getting low. I scarcely think I'll get another drink till I get to Buffalo. Oh, get to one more time. Ah, the Erie was rising, and the gin was getting low. I scarcely think that I'll get another drink till I get to Buffalo. Oh, get to Buffalo. I wrote that song myself in 1883. Now there were other people. It was so important to improve navigation, to get your crops, your material, your product to market. Now we moved the stage over to New York. In the eastern part of New York, you know, my Albany. And they tried to do the same thing that Washington did. It was also another Revolutionary War hero, Philip Schuyler, General Philip Schuyler. Private company, couldn't get any money from the government. So he had a bunch of people working with him. They did a wonderful job, but it was just too big. Again, they used a natural body of water, the Mohawk River. It had all the same problems. It flooded in the spring, it was dry in the summer, short navigation. You had a lot of natural impediments to get by, the falls, the rapids. But again, good engineering, and they made some progress. It was really difficult. But I'll tell you what their goal wasn't. Their goal was not to build a canal across northern New York State. It just wasn't. They didn't really see, because this is now in the 1790s, didn't see the value of it. First of all, to be very fair, where you and I live in the Buffalo area, you live here, there weren't any people. So there wasn't any need. But the people that were out east needed help. So their idea was to improve navigation. And the name of the company was the Western Inland Navigation Company. And they worked pretty well. They did well, but they didn't have the money. The maintenance because you were constantly building canals, you were building things to get over the rapids, and the maintenance cost a fortune. And they had a lot of problems with the state, at least of which the state would not give them any money, but they constantly got in their way. They did pretty well. You know how far they got? They got to Rome. That's halfway across the state, if you'll remember. They built a canal into Rome. I don't know where the Mohawk River ends, but they got into Rome. That's pretty good, but they went bankrupt. I have another song. You're going to find that I'm going to have a few. It was written by a guy named Dave Brigham and Edward Harrigan for a vaudeville show called The Grip in the 1880s. So out goes the romance of the drunk on top of the boat with a banjo or something writing the song. Those earlier songs, Thax who wrote them. Oh, God, they're horrible. You can't believe back then how many bad songs were written. Some years ago, I played in my background for a moment. I played in an Irish band for almost 30 years. Really not doing that anymore. We're all on our own. And one of us is dead, so he's really on his own. But we were asked at one point by this gentleman who just wouldn't stop asking. It had to be 2015. It was the celebration of the end of the war in 1812. When actually there was a lot of history in Western New York. To tell you the truth, we do not celebrate. You go over the river to Canada, it's like the 4th of July. It's a big deal. And so they said, can you come and do an hour's program and do a bunch of these songs? And I said, sure. And then I looked at the songs. I finally found 12 songs that didn't have leave. So there were a lot of bad songs back then. And it wasn't until not too long before Stephen Foster, that American music, started to just explode. So you really got to pick. Well, this one's called Oh Dat Low Bridge. As you'll see, the boat is pretty low. You'll see the one that comes in on September 28th, the packet boats. When they built the canal, people built bridges over them because farmers had to get from one end of their property to the other. They had to connect roads. They didn't make the bridges very high because that was more expensive, I guess. So they didn't do it. So you constantly were hearing, oh, that low bridge, keep your head down. Because when it was warm, well, those boats, they smelled. It was kind of bad. And so you'd be inside, so you'd go outside for air, and they would bring a chair up, and they would sit on the roof. And here would come a boat. If you didn't have somebody warning you, boom, So, and there were 300 bridges built on the original Erie Canal. Again, I need some help. This time desperately. In the verses, it's pretty simple. I'll sing the first verse. It's many miles to Buffalo, and we all sing in 5-part harmony, if you don't mind. Oh, that low bridge, talking muley travels slow. Oh, that low bridge. Job is done for the rest of the verse, but then we get to the chorus. Look out that low bridge. Look out that low bridge. they should give you a cut on your admission fee. Yeah. Well, it's many miles to Buffalo. Oh, that low bridge, balky mule, he travels slow. Oh, that low bridge, there's gravel along the towpath, there's cinders in the sand. Oh, pity poor canalers, so far away from land. Now we should make them sing the last song, because away from land. Look out that low bridge. 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 The captain cook and all the crew now stick your heads way down. Passengers both in on the feet, two sisters on the town. Many locks to shut you in. Oh, that low bridge, every worm must learn to swim. Oh, that low bridge, we're loaded down with barley and timber from the west. Oh, poor canalers, please do your level best. Look out that low bridge, look out that low bridge, look out that low bridge, look out that low bridge. The captain cook and all the crew now tuck your heads way down. People canalers, two sisters on the town. Froze up in the winter time. Oh, that low bridge, summer how the sun do shine. Oh, that low bridge, in rain or stormy weather, the captain's on the poop. We're all huddled up together like chickens in the coop. Look out that low bridge, look out that low bridge, look out that low bridge, look out that low bridge. The captain cook and all the crew now stick your heads way down. And on the feet, two sisters on the town. Well, now it starts to get serious about the canal. Not the government, they really weren't doing anything. But there was a guy named Jesse Hawley. Jesse Hawley is an interesting guy because you think of people who come up with these brilliant plans on their own. They're brilliant people. But he wasn't, he was a dummy. But for 1 minute he was smart. Just for a minute. There's dreamers who dreamed about what the canal could do. People would pour in, you would populate, you would produce, and you would ship things east and then south to New York City. And New York City exploded. They thought of those things. Now, Jesse Hawley was from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and he found himself 1800, a little bit later than that, in central New York. He was a flour merchant, so he went out and he would buy the material from the farmers and the wheat, and then he would pound it into flour. Now came the hard part. You would think that would be hard enough. He somehow had to get that flour to market and not go bankrupt because of the transportation costs. To give you an example, when the canal opened, it cost about $10 a ton to transport it that far to eventually get it to New York. It was $100 a ton in 1800, 1802, 1803. So it was very difficult, and he had gone bankrupt once before and escaped. Well, he went bankrupt again, seriously so, and he had a partner who stole $10,000 from him. So he's left holding the bag, and do you know what happened in 1806 when you couldn't pay your bills? Debtor's prison. He didn't want to go there, so he escaped to Pennsylvania, and he really thought day and night about there's got to be a way for people in upstate New York to be productive and to not go bankrupt because of transportation. You know, you can think of weather, right? Where you have no labor or fires. This should be fixable. But his conscience got the best of him, and he went back to central New York, and they put him into prison. Now, I say prison, but it was a hotel. It was owned by the sheriff, and he was on the second floor, and he had a very good relationship, as it turned out, with the sheriff. There were people doing surveys all over the state. Nobody had put it together. Nobody had the dream. All these surveys and maps, and he had 20 months to kill. Morning, noon, and night, he dreamed about, we can do this. He finally had a plan, and it was brilliant. He figured out the route that the canal should take, because his idea was to get from the Hudson to Lake Erie. That was the plan now, and nobody really would say it out loud. And he thought that would do it. It could be done. So he had it published. 14 essays were published in the newspapers. Well, at that point in time, two legislators, William Kirkpatrick and Joshua Foreman, they were in the legislature there in New York. They had been talking about the same thing, but the degree of detail from Jesse Hawley, again, not a very bright guy, but he did a very brilliant thing. The route, how many people it was going to take, how much it was going to cost. It was breathtaking, but it got people involved. Foreman and Kilpatrick. And at that time, there had been an interview with President Jefferson, who said the United States was flush with cash. The Treasury was flush with cash. And he said, we've got all this money, and we're very prosperous, and I want to stay prosperous. So I'd like to invest it in infrastructure, bridges, roads, and canals. Well, Kirkpatrick and Foreman couldn't believe their ears, so they made their way to New York, to Washington, and got an interview with Jefferson. He just completely did a 180. He says, your plan, and it was tremendously detailed that they laid out. Your plan is little short of madness. Now, how can he had just been talking. This was Jefferson. And I have a scientific reason for it, why he turned. He was a weenie. He was a weenie when he was young. He was a weenie when he was old. He was a weenie. He was not very popular with people who knew him. He had friends, but with people that knew him, he was George Washington's Secretary of State. Now that's the most powerful man in the country after the president. Much better than vice president. And he's feeding money to the opposition parties. This was in the second administration of Washington. And they are just bashing Washington in the newspapers, and he's bankrolling it. So this is what he was like. Years later, some years before, George Washington died in 1799, and the idea was people that knew him would go and visit Mount Vernon to pay respects to Martha Washington. But he didn't know, I don't think, or maybe he didn't care. Martha Washington hated him because of what he did to her husband. I guess it was a tight 3 days before he finally left. But Foreman and Kilpatrick, they didn't care. They said, we know we can do this, we just need the money. So when they went back, they became involved with a man named Clinton, DeWitt Clinton. Now, DeWitt Clinton had a background. He had been the mayor of New York City for 3 terms. He had worked in his uncle's administration. His uncle had been governor of New York. He had been in the legislature for 3 terms, 4 terms. He really knew where the bodies were buried. He knew where to go, and they worked together. They formed eventually the Canal Commission, which he ran. And they were moving the progress, and unfortunately the War of 1812 came and slowed things down, but improved a few things. Canal was really important. In the War of 1812, there's the famous story of a $400 cannon that it cost $1,000 to ship to where they needed it. And they thought, you know, I heard people would argue you can use Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario was a British lake. You weren't going to be able to use those. The canals were what you needed. So anyway, 1816, state legislature says, we'll pay for it. Now this song has nothing to do, really, with what I just talked about. And that's the beauty of it. What a lot of canal songs were, at least the ones that were okay, they would steal the melodies from popular songs, from Stephen Foster in particular. And this one's called Runaway Mules. The music was written by Stephen Foster to the tune of Oh Susanna. And it's heartfelt, the stories here. There was a young man who was a mule driver. He would walk with the mules along the towpath. Well, one night, the mules ran off. Now he's in trouble. But up comes, yes, before you say it, I'll say it, a talking bullfrog. True story. True story. And the bullfrog says, I'll help you. I'll help you get out of this. Now the mules ran off and I fell down. I really thought I'd croak. Now the bullfrog yelled, look out there, boy. I'll jump right down your throat. Last night was a hummer. All fear was there in style. But I'll look beyond his capers, for I love the old canal. Now the bullfrog, he looked up at me. My face was all put out. I bet you thought a talking frog would be your biggest doubt. I saw those mules run away from you and leave you in a lie. But maybe I can help you for a bag full of flies. Last night was a hummer, all fear was a smile. So I looked beyond his capers, for I love the old canal. Now I thought, said I need those mules, or else my boss will beat my tongue. But if the price are a bunch of flies, I needn't have looked far. I opened my mouth, I let them in, I smell them at the front. It sure is like they always say, with flies don't be a harm. Last night was a hummer, all fear was there in style. I looked beyond my capers, for love the old canal. Last night was a hummer, all fear was there in style. For I looked beyond the capers, for I love the old canal. Now the long and winding road of the start of construction for the Erie Canal ended on July 4th, 1817 in Rome. Remember, that's where the Inland Navigation Company ended theirs. Well, that's where they began. It was a brilliant way of doing it. They had 100 miles. They had 100 miles of flat ground in which they could finish up pretty quick and start bringing in money to pay off the debt. There was hardly anything about. I'm amazed by it. With the clowns every time we build something now. Oh, there's going to be $2 billion more, a cost overruns. No, I understand, this ran $1.5 million less than it was supposed to, and a year early. They just did everything right. This DeWitt Clinton, when people say, well, who built the canal? He built the canal. He's the one who got it going. He's the one who managed it. Brilliant. By this time, I believe he was now his first term of governor of New York, or right around there. So he was there for the digging. And the canal started, but here there were some problems, as you can imagine. Nobody lived up here. So they had nobody there were some people, but there weren't very many. But they did something that was very intelligent. They subcontracted parts of the canal off to people who had a real interest in having it built quickly and well. That was a great idea. Plus, those people would have better connections with getting the labor force put together, because you needed labor. There wasn't any labor up here to speak of. So they would go looking for immigrants, obviously, in the downstate. Now, the immigrants were largely Germans and Irish. And there are people who make a big deal. I'm Irish. My family's 100% Irish. So I love when they get more credit than they deserve. I read a book, Canal Water and Whiskey, long time ago. A very entertaining book. It made it seem like there was nobody else. But there was. And the Germans are always understated. But there were a lot of Germans. And they did a wonderful job. So how do you get these people? Well, they would post advertisements in New York City for these immigrants. They needed jobs. They're looking for jobs. And it would say, they weren't getting paid much. 50 cents a day, $1 maybe if you were a tradesman. But the Irish weren't all about money, for God's sakes. They love whiskey. So the ads would say, meat 3 times a day. That's a big deal. Bread, lots of bread, vegetables, and a reasonable amount of whiskey. Well, they couldn't get up to the starting gate fast enough. What they would do, this is what they would do. They would give them a shot of whiskey at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're already off to a good start, right? A shot of whiskey at 4 in the afternoon, and a sip every hour on the hour. Wow. How do you get anything done? There was a gentleman named Damien Giloni. He was a writer, and he talked about when you add whiskey to gunpowder and sharp tools, you end up with a lot of guys with nicknames like Lefty, One-Eyed Sean, and Jimmy No Hands. But there was another benefit to them building the canal, and they did a good job. They populated the state of New York, the upper state. My family was no different. Though we're originally from Brooklyn. But I had 2 great aunts who raised my father, and they were like my grandparents, wonderful people. They moved up to Johnstown. Anybody knows where Johnstown is? Gloversville?
Yep.
Oh,
That's my hometown.
I love Johnstown. Very historical place.
Yeah.
And it's a canal area. Well, my wife and I took a ride. My 2 great aunts had passed, and they're buried there. We wanted to see their graves, to see what the stone looked like. We were going to put some embellishments on it. And we get to this St. Patrick's Cemetery, and we started looking. It was amazing. We got 2/3 through the cemetery before we saw a name that wasn't Irish. So those people lived and died and built. They would build until, they would find a job, and then they would start working that, or they'd save money and buy a farm. So there were probably about 50,000 workers. Now, some of them only worked a day or 2 before maybe they weren't drinkers. I don't know. Now, this next song was written by James Bland. James Bland was brilliant. He was a songwriter. He was born in Flushing, New York, Queens, and 1854, died in 1911. He's a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He wrote over 700 songs. So he was something, and some of them you would know today. In the Evening by the Moonlight, Carry Me Back to Old Virginia, and this song, kind of, Golden Slippers, which I know very well from being an Irish man. Everybody, old-timey players, Irish singers, they all play this great tune, Golden Slippers. Is it Irish? No. We just liked it. So we did it. And, well, as a matter of fact, he had another nickname. He was also known as the Black Stephen Foster. So he was black. He was supposedly the first successful black songwriter of his time. But he wrote this song, and again, here's another song that was taken, that was known, apparently that was known pretty well. But he had an unusual upbringing. His father became the first black patent examiner, so they had to move to Washington. And James was a musician and a songwriter. This is all he wanted to do. So that he gets out of high school, him and his father both go to college at Howard. His father wanted to be a lawyer, and all he wanted to do was be a singer and a songwriter. So he gets out of college, and he wants to be in one of those minstrel groups, if you're familiar with the minstrel groups that go from city to city. But you know, they were white guys who painted their faces black. Well, they turned him down. He was already pre-black. I saved room in the dressing room, but it worked out for the best. He got into a black minstrel group, and they were brilliant. They toured Europe. They played for Queen Victoria and the Prince of Wales, and he was making $10,000 a year. Well, he was really good. He was really good. So,
What was his name?
James Bland. Yep. Now, so they took this song, great melody, and they put a theme to it. Now, if you were on a boat on the canal, if you worked on the boat, you're outside. It didn't matter if it rained, if it was hailing, if it was a hurricane, you're outside in that terrible weather. So you had to dress for it, so they would take clothing and they would embed it with oil and what have you to make it waterproof. So they wrote words and they called us the oilskin slickers, because that's what the material is. Now everybody can sing this with me. Oh, them oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, hat, coat, breeches, rubber boots, a weekend. No, I wouldn't do that. Oh, them oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, hat, coat, breeches, rubber boots, a we can keep driving the touring shoe and oh, them oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, as we gaily move along down the old canal. Storm comes up, we don our skins to keep us warm and dry and sun. When those sheets or torrents fall, our oilskins we will surely more than know. Our oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, hat, coat, breeches, rubber boots. You can keep trying the torrent shoot and know. Them oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, as we gaily move along. A long tail hat to catch the shoes. The water must as we slip along. While on the boat we'll hear that song and know. Them oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, hat, coat, breeches, rubber boots. But we can keep driving the torrent shoot and low. Them oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, as we gaily move along down the old canal. Protect us from many things I'm not discussing. The weather I can sink or swim, I'll keep them hanging my riches. At night when thunder and the lightning came, and our heads found lost in me. Oh, what a beautiful sight, old pal, rain on the old canal. And oh, our oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, hat, coat, breeches, rubber boots. Oh, we can keep trying the torrent shoe and low. Them oilskin slickers, oh, them oilskin slickers, as we bravely move on down the old canal. One of the things I was going to talk about, but I'm not, is there was a big argument for a couple of years on where the canal was going to terminate, Buffalo or Black Rock. Black Rock had some advantages, but it was away from Lake Erie, and it was very difficult to get a boat into the lake. You would think Buffalo's perfect, but it had no. It was sand, a huge sandbar, You had to land a boat a million miles away. Here I am talking about something I wasn't going to talk about. But I'm wondering, eventually Buffalo got picked, obviously, and I was wondering how'd they get by not being able to get a boat into a harbor. They had no natural harbor. So I actually joined the Buffalo Harbor Club, not the club, Buffalo Harbor Museum. And I talked to 3 guys there. They didn't know either. So how can I talk about something that nobody knows about? Now, about a year and a half before the canal reaches completion, in April of 1824, at this point, Clinton had been governor twice. He wasn't governor anymore. The People's Party that he belonged to, and they fought with the Democrats. And they didn't give him the nomination. I don't think he was a real popular guy in his party, but people liked him, and he was worshipped for building the Erie Canal. He was worshipped. It didn't matter that he wasn't the governor anymore. He was the head of the Canal Commission. Nobody was in the papers more than the head of the Canal Commission, because it was just one of those wonders of the ages. So he wasn't given the nomination. Somebody else had it. Now we're in April of 1824, and at that time, the New York legislature was stopping for the season. But that was it. It was the end of the season, and they would pick it up later, and the governorship was in November, which he wasn't going to be a candidate anyway. Well, the Democrats saw what was going to happen, they thought, with DeWitt Clinton. He was eventually going to be president. He had aspirations, and they didn't want that. So what they did in the legislature on the last day, literally people are putting their coats on. Somebody brought up a motion to remove him from the Canal Commission. See, he would have been taken away. He literally would have had no voice. Nobody's coming to interview him. He'll get no more ink. That's what they tried to do, and they did it. Both houses of the legislature voted for it, and finally, one of the guys got up to speak in his defense, somebody from Montgomery County, said, "You're going to pass this ridiculous motion." It was the Democrats who did this, by the way. So when people think politics have never been dirty, they've always been dirty. And he got up and said, you're going to get your way here, but the people will not have it. Finally, the word slipped out. It passed. He's out. The word slipped out. In New York City, thousands of people came out to demonstrate when they didn't demonstrate those days. They're looking for a building. There wasn't a building big enough to hold all these people. Same thing in Albany. There was such a hullabaloo that the People's Party was embarrassed by this, even though they had nothing to do with it. However, a guy named Talmadge, who was going to be nominated for governor by the People's Party, he had signed on to it. When they voted, he signed his name. So there was no way they could put him up. So they had to, there was such an outrage from the people that they put Clinton up for governor. It would not have happened otherwise. But it happened, and he won. And the beauty of it, the justice of it, is the next year, when they did the victory lap, when the canal was finished, he got to lead that victory. So that was fair. That was fair. It was done in October. So in October, the party started. It was the biggest thing of the century. And so Clinton, as the governor, and believe it or not, Talmadge, who was his vice governor, came to Buffalo to start it off. They fired up they were very big on firing cannons in the 19th century. They fired every cannon that they could find. And then the next stop on the canal did the same thing. Rochester did it all the way up until the Hudson River, all the way down the Hudson River and into New York City. And then up the Hudson River, down the canal, and back to Buffalo. So it was incredible. He gave a wonderful speech. But one of the nice things, Jesse Hollins, who had given the original blueprint, they had never met him before. Clinton had never met him. Because he had already gone bankrupt again. It's what he did. But they invited him, and he gave a speech, which I thought was a really nice thing. Well, they got down to they went from, one of the things you have got to hand it over to Clinton for is, he had to have a liver of cast iron. Because the drinking and the parties at every stop were overwhelming, except in Rome, where it started. Because they were furious that this canal did not come through their city. When the old canal from the navigation company, Inland Navigation Company, had gone through the city. So they were furious. So the newspaper told everybody to come down to meet the boat, because there was a boat, the Seneca Chief, which had been built for it. Seneca Chief came, come down in funeral attire. Bad sports, bad sports. Well, it went the rest of the way. The celebrations became bigger and bigger. And I got to think that Clinton thought he was probably going to die pretty soon. But he made it to New York, where there was a tremendous celebration. A British warship was there, flying the American colors. They had 13 casks of Erie Canal water, which they dumped in the Atlantic Ocean. There were containers of all the great rivers in the world that had been sent, like the Ganges and the Nile and the Mississippi, that were sent. And those were shipped to France, to General Lafayette, who had done a tour of the United States just a year before, even down the canal, except from Buffalo because it hadn't been built yet. He started it in Lockport or someplace. And he was not in good health. He was 67 or something, and he was old. But he loved America and the parties that when he would visit a city, America really loved him. It was really nice to see how gracious Americans were. God knows we're not now. So here's your punishment for coming tonight. So when all the festivities were almost done, a guy named Samuel Wordsworth, a well-known writer, poet, songwriter. I know he wrote it in 1825, but it's still a good song, even though it was written back then. And an Irish singer sang this song in New York City. Of course, that's what makes it so good. The days be forever remembered with pride. I beheld the proud Hudson and Erie alive. Alas, and the tide from the glass shall descend. Their reunion so fruitful, whose story will end. Our union so fruitful, whose glory will end. 'Tis that genius has triumphed and science prevailed, that prejudice clouded and envy assailed. It is that
wife was sitting there, so I thought she was.
Wasn't going to play the banjo tonight. I've told people last year, because I've only been playing it for a few years, and it's not respected among musicians. No, you're a second class, not even a third class citizen. When the banjo player, there's jokes about us. Even though I'm mostly a guitar player, there's jokes about us. There's stories about us. Oh, they get a lot of laughs on banjo players. And I will repeat the story that I told last time, which I think is, you tell me, it's so insulting. There's a man named Robert, and Robert was a bridge player. He was a good bridge player, and he would go to his bridge club downtown every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. He was never late. If you knew Robert like I knew Robert, you would know he was punctual. So it's 7 o'clock. It's 7:10. No Robert. Everyone is really worried. 7:20. Where's Robert? Finally, he comes in. Robert, what happened to you? He says, oh, I was almost here. And I turned around the corner, and there were 5 guys beating up a banjo player. So they said, did you help? Well, I thought 5 was enough.